because they have a lot of potential liability there. So that's basically where we're at with this. Again, we'll get with the applicant when we have a report from our engineer and discuss any issues or modifications that they may need to make. The wall itself, I would note, is, I know there was a statement made that it would be around 10 feet, and it generally will be around 10 feet, but it is proposed to vary because they're trying to keep that top cap consistent throughout the wall. So depending on the associated topography, the wall itself will kind of vary in height. Some of it might be a little lower than 10 feet, some of it might be more. So that's one thing I just need to make sure y'all are okay with. But like I said, a vast majority of the veneer will be the Trex composite. So I don't think it's anything that they wouldn't want to do because it's a safety related request. So basically with those, we had some other review comments that were in the staff recommendations dealing with pipe types in one location, the type of catch basin used. We do have a detail of the fencing that was emailed to me today, and it's basically something like that. It's about 42 inches high. This is about 5 feet behind the soil nail wall, and there's, if you look at the cross section, you've got the, let me go back to that. But this here, this is the soil nail wall, and then this is the veneer. Then they're going to have a flume back behind the top of the soil nail wall to capture the water that's coming down and directing that to the east and west, basically. And then behind that, they'll have, this is where the 42-inch fence is, about 5 feet behind, 3 to 5 feet behind the flume. So that's basically what they're proposing. This sheet here shows most of what the veneer composition would be as far as how they're putting it together, attaching it to the soil nail wall, and those kind of things. I know the applicant is here if you have specific technical questions, because I'm by no means an expert on this matter at all. So with that, the staff does recommend approval subject to those 4 comments that were part of the staff recommendations.
Could you briefly go back to the fence detail again that you got, since we hadn't seen that one before?
Yeah, I hadn't seen it until today either, but
Take a look at that.
I think it's going to be an aluminum fence, it looks to me like. I think they can clarify that. But again, I haven't really reviewed this. It was just one of the remaining comments, number 3.
Yeah.
Also, Mark, the when we get to making the final part of this, is this coming back to the Planning Commission, or are we approving it with all these subject twos?
Well, there's only
leaving it up
4
to the
subject
staff?
twos. I would say unless our structural engineer has some serious issues that we deem need to be brought back to you all, then I would be comfortable with these 4 remaining comments if they can be adequately addressed.
Should we make that a subject to as well?
Yes,
You can if you want.
I
Yeah,
feel more
that's fine.
comfortable.
Sure.
I would too,
Yeah.
yes.
Mark, how would we affect and enforce a long-term maintenance agreement, or obviously that would be something that I would assume a responsible property owner would want, but
Yeah, I mean, they would have to put that in their restrictions and covenants, and you know, like the planned commercial development has some of that already, and they probably need to have some detail about that so that, you know, 15, 20 years from now, if there is some maintenance that's needed, that it's pretty clear. And then maybe just a way, and they may already be doing this, but a way to just periodically inspect the wall and the veneer on a pretty regular basis, just to make sure that there's not any safety-related issues with either one.
But whose responsibility is that become to make sure that's happening? Is it our responsibility to make sure it's
I
happening?
think it's our responsibility to to ensure that there's a document that's in place that runs with the land that addresses those kinds of things.
Okay,
I don't think that we would necessarily be involved. It'd be kind of like us, we require covenants and restrictions and subdivisions, but we really don't normally get involved in the long-term enforcement
okay.
of those things.
Could that be a subject too as well?
Yeah, it could be. Hmm.
So we have a fifth subject to for what? What was the fifth one?
That had to do with the third-party engineering, okay, and the design.
Okay.
That's number 4.
That covered, I think what we're talking about is
Yeah.
some sort of maintenance
Adding to
plan
that and saying, and
We just need a maintenance
reviewed by
plan.
staff.
incorporated.
So he wants to add to number 4 and approved by staff.
Are we adding to number 4 or are we making it
That's,
number
I think
5?
they're suggesting we add that and approved by staff as part of number 4. And then number 5 is part of the covenants and restrictions is a.
Yeah, I'd just say maintenance and periodic, inspection, some kind of program for that, because it's I don't know that we have a soil nail wall. I'm not familiar with any in the area, and I'm really not familiar with any veneer concealing those, so I think it's kind of a little bit of a different element.
Okay.
And Mark, would all of that be covered with, we've seen this in other apartment complexes around the area, that at some point in time after it's built, it's sold.
Yeah, it would have to be something that would run with the land, so it gets
Okay.
recorded and it's transferable to any future owners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we have that covered too.
I just don't want there to be a situation where it's there, they put the facade up and nobody ever
Looks at it
ever
again.
pays any attention to it, and then something happens because nobody was really staying on top of it.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that I had a couple months ago when we looked at this was the bumper overhang, the distance between the parking spots and the actual wall itself. And I think the applicant at the time said there were some areas that were going to get pretty close to the curb. And an easy fix would be to put some curb stops in to keep a vehicle from, especially like if you had a big truck with a hitch on it that backed into a spot, well, that hitch could very well back into the brick veneer wall and then destabilize the wall. And so I think there was some discussion that we had about that on some areas, and I can't really tell by the plan that I have before me how much distance. I mean, is that 18 inches? Is it 24 inches? Is it 36 inches? I'm not really sure. I think that the wall that's out there today kind of undulates,
It does.
for lack of a better word. And so and they're trying to put a straight veneer wall in front of it, which is fine. But I do think that there are some areas that that the wall is awfully close to the curb line. And if you have a vehicle that parks their tires all the way up to the curb, you could very well encroach that area and damage the wall. So again, this is just kind of an observation from personal experience that if there's a way to prohibit that, the easiest thing to do would be to, again, put some parking stops in, and that's typically after the asphalt's installed. But I just can't tell by the drawings and by the renderings of what's happening there. I don't know if you,
Suggested distance, Noah?
yeah, I would really think you really need 36 inches. I mean, if you have a pickup truck, a long big pickup truck that backs in, there's a big overhang that occurs from where the tires and the axle touch the curb to where the bumper or even a hitch could do so. I mean, and again, this is not an engineering principle that I can defend, but in my experience, I think you really need 36 inches. And if you don't have 36 inches of clear space, you probably need some parking stops added there, which is a real cheap remedy to resolve that.
I know they are adding parking stops. They talked about that at the March workshop. The distance, and this is really important that that you don't hit this wall, obviously, because this is not just like parking stops in a lot of other applications. You want to make sure that you're far enough away with those curb stops that, the wheel stops, that you're not going to have even the longest vehicle accidentally tapping that wall. So, you can add that as a subject too as well if you want to, that there needs to be wheel stops at a distance from the curb face that,
Can we just
You
do
know-
36 inches from the curb face
what the,
or less?
Well, there might be an engineer that could just say, hey, that 30 inches is appropriate, but
Yeah.
there's a little strip of landscaping in there, and that very well may be adequate to address these concerns, but it is a concern, and I do think that the wall as proposed encroaches closer to the parking lot than what we originally approved a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I just think it needs to, it'd be a real easy way to try to prevent some damage from occurring on that wall if somebody bumps into it. And I just have to defer to somebody. In my experience, 36 inches, but I'm not an expert when it comes to,
we
parking
can-
design.
if you all want, we can add that as a subject
think it's a
too.
good subject.
I know they were going to put the wheel stops in, but we might want to really, really look at that section and make sure that it's maybe a little further away than the typical wheel stops are, because most wheel stops I look at when I do site inspections are not 36 inches. That's pretty far. But if that's what it takes to protect that wall, then that's what they need to do.
36 inches may only be, you'd only have to pull the wheel stop back that far if the wall was on the curb line.
That's true.
But if they're able to
That's true.
maintain some sort of flower bed in there some distance, they should get credit for that. And obviously, they're
Right.
probably going to want to do something that's uniformly going to look good when you're installing the curb stops. I mean, they make concrete curb stops. They actually make rubber curb stops. I mean, it's not that big a deal. But again, I think it's just a preventative measure to try to keep that wall from getting bumped into. I mean, that doesn't stop somebody from hitting the gas instead of the brake and running into the wall. That could happen anywhere. But it would stop most people when they're backing into a spot, or sometimes you see somebody might they might have a trailer for some reason that they back into a spot, who a resident there, and they back it into the spot. You just don't want them bumping into it.
No.
So you want to add that?
So I
as
think
a
maybe
sixth-
we could add that as maybe a number 6.
How about
And,
measures taken to preclude vehicles from backing into walls, something like that?
Okay.
I'm comfortable with some of the sections being less than 10 feet. I think that they're just trying to do a visual line. And at the end of the day, we just want it to be safe.
And Mark, can you pull up the drainage, the new drainage drawings for the wall, where the flume dumps down
Yeah,
and goes down the hill?
this is showing the system as it's tying into out along Watt Road, coming around on the east end of the wall. And then over, let's see, this one is over on the west end, I think. But they did some drainage calculations and added some drainage system, catch basins to try to, let me see if I've got any other sheets. Yeah, this is the overall sheet
No, the one that you had up to begin with.
with the catch basins, yeah. Well, this shows kind of the,
Keep
let
going.
me see, this one shows that the fact that some of the water is obviously going to go to the east, some of it's going to go to the west. A couple of the staff's comments were related to.
Right here, right here.
Yeah,
Got it. What I would like to see is, you've got it coming down the hill and you've got a 90. You've got a corner.
yeah, right here,
No. Well, anywhere where it changes direction.
yeah.
It's an open flume. Okay, so you're going to, during the fall, you're going to have leaves and everything else that's going to be getting into it. What I'd like to see is where these corners are at, I'd like to see a clean out. Because if that gets stopped up, then what do? That may be designed that way, I don't know, I can't tell by,
I think they're concrete structures, so they should have access on the top of the structure to be able to, you know, if
Yeah,
it
there
did
would be,
clog up. So
an
basically what you're
access
seeing
at
right
each
there
of
in the
these
black and
points
white,
here.
that's
Open
area
draw.
that converts to underground. Everything else is kind of above ground drainage.
Yeah, but down here where it says, well, where the black and white goes to a corner,
Right.
At the-
and then it goes, at that point, it's headed north, and then it heads east before it heads north again. My concern is where there's corners, that there be a clean out.
And they can speak to that. I think they're here if you have some specific questions about the design.
David Gardner, 814 East Woodland, Knoxville. Yeah, those are all catch basins. They'll have drainage tops on them. They're accessible. So can be
Just wanna
cleaned
make
out
sure.
and maintained, no problem.
That's all I have.
Anybody else have any questions or comments from the planning commission?
I'm just curious, what's your thoughts on the distance from the wall to the back of a vehicle with a curb stop?
I'd say that 30 inches. We'll talk with engineers and find out, but I agree, we talked about that last time. Adding parking stops is no issue, and I think it's something we can get the recommendation, get with the inspectors in the field, come to an agreement where we need to place them. No issue whatsoever on our part.
I'm going to make a motion to approve with the 6 subject twos.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Number 5 is discussion and public hearing on the site plan modification for Tommy's Boat Storage and Retail, 11470 Outlet Drive, 10.86 acres, zone OD-RE/E, urban engineering applicant.
This item involves, this is the original stamped approved site plan for, at the time, that was Moses Water Sports. And they had 24 parking spaces, and it was basically here. Since that time, they actually purchased part of the land to the east, which is actually just west of Topgolf. And so they've been trying to come up with an idea of how to use that additional space and store more boats on the property. So that's basically what this involves, is there's expanding the boat storage area to the east in this general area here, and then there's some around the building as well. As you all may remember, when the Moses site plan was approved, we talked about the requirement that the boat storage has to be hidden, so it can't be viewed from public rights-of-ways. So at the time, they had a 8-foot fence, that stretched across the part that they were using for storage. Now, since they're extending that to the east, the fence is also being extended to, basically this whole section through here to conceal the storage from Outlet Drive. So that's an element of this. They also are incorporating some permeable pavers because with this additional boat storage parking, they are overparked. They have 64 required parking spaces, and they're showing 100. So the excess is having to be part of a permeable paver system to meet our low-impact development requirements. They may do something in the future in this area, but it's not part of this plan right now. So this is basically what they're proposing. The building itself is not changing. As you all may remember, we approved a modification to the building several months ago at a different planning commission meeting. The building original building had more blue sections, and they've converted that to more of their prototype colors from their headquarters in Michigan. It's more earth tone, which the planning commission was favorable toward that. So the building itself is not changing, and that's still what it's proposed to look like. So then the fence detail also is not changing. It's an 8-foot fence, and it would have it's got 16-inch wide brick end posts and 6x6 wood posts in between that are spaced roughly 8 feet apart. And then it's going to have wood slats to basically provide the screening for that. So that's what's being proposed at this time. The staff recommends approval of this site plan revision subject to the 3 comments that were in the staff recommendations.
Mark, what is number 2, a potential vehicular connection to the Sal property, or I don't know how to say that?
Yeah, we looked at that in an earlier version, I think, too.
Which one is, which
The
one?
Sayo property is over here.
But that's all.
Well, this is a sinkhole. They might
I was
be
gonna
able
say.
to connect this way. I don't know that it's really provides much of a benefit, even if they did connect it, because it really is not going to connect probably to Top Golf back there. So, I mean, that could be, I think the way we phrased it was just to look at a concept for potentially having a vehicular connection. But again, it's not something that I don't think we would require. It's just something that they might want to explore.
I'm not tied to it because then it's, removing trees and I don't know that it's necessary there, even if Top
Yeah.
Golf doesn't,
Depending on how the developable part of this property, which there's not a lot to the east, occurs, that it might be beneficial for them to connect through there instead of having a separate
but then they
access.
have to,
If I'm
But I
Excuse me.
don't know.
I'm sorry.
It's,
Tommy's Water Sports, I don't want any connection. Period. I've got valuable
yeah, storage.
boats and outdoor storage. I have no commonality necessarily. It's gonna be with the,
Yeah.
with the property next door. So I see it as a negative, so I don't.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm not in favor of
Yeah, we can
number-
take
number-
that off. Again, it wasn't a requirement. It was more just a, discussion comment.
but usually when you do connect, it's on the frontages so that
yeah.
you've got connection in
Yeah.
between the two, and of course you can't
They
do it
don't
on
have the
frontage 'cause
opportunity.
that's where the
No.
sinkhole is, so I think we can take number 2 off.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
I don't think they're going to take a boat across the sinkhole.
No, I don't
Not
think.
purposefully, anyway.
We're like Corvettes going down the sinkhole.
Yeah.
2 remaining comments, and that's all we have on that one.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve the site plan as presented, subject to items number 1 and number 3.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Item number 6, discussion and public hearing on a land disturbance and grading plan for the property located at 11344 Sonia Drive, 11.45 acres, zoned R-1, OSMR, Hatfield and Allen Associates applicant.
Yeah, this is kind of an unusual item because it involves a single-family lot, but they are disturbing more than an acre, so they have to be covered through the state with a notice of coverage. And because of the scale of the grading involved and the fact they have a lot of retaining walls, we wanted this to come before the Planning Commission. This is at the at the northeast intersection of the high school entrance off of North Campbell Station Road, and just to the south of Sonia. And basically what they're trying to do here, the property owner is wanting to, a lot of this site was just kind of rough graded, and they just kind of padded out where the house and the existing improvements are, and there's a lot of kudzu and invasives that have taken over a large part of the property. So what he's really trying to do is just regrade the property, incorporate some relatively short ready rock retaining walls, and then try to get rid of the invasive material, basically making it more manageable, more visually appealing piece of property, and more usable for him, to give him more usable space. When this was actually platted, it's zoned open space mixed residential, and it has required open space platted as part of this parcel. They're not proposing to grade within any existing tree-covered portions of their open space, because that's not allowed. And they're also not proposing to further develop the property. It's really just a major property beautification plan that they're proposing. So the staff recommends approval of the grading plan for this. There were 6 subject tos, most of those dealing with just paperwork that needs to be provided in order to obtain the grading permit.
Mark, is there any reason for this to go to VRB?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, the wall, this is a ready rock wall, and most of the wall, it's between 3 to 6 feet as they're putting in. But it's a lot of retaining wall sections. But they're not really tall, and they look to be pretty attractive type of walls. But, I mean, we can do whatever you want, but I wouldn't see this as being necessary to go to the VRB.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Mark?
I do. I think I heard you say they're gonna try to remove the invasive species, the kudzu, and there's
Yeah,
and there's
it's
a
going to
lot
be a
of it.
challenge, yeah.
So my question kind of is, what kind of ground cover can we expect? Because that bank that's visible along Cable Station, I'm kind of curious of what's going to replace the kudzu.
Yeah, well, it's a,
Both for.
it may be a several-year process to get, if they ever get rid of all of it, because it's really, it's been there for a long time, as everybody knows, and it's a big area. So I think it's going to involve some grading, and that's partly what will help, but, you know, I'm not a kudzu removal expert, but, you know, I think you're going to have to get into the soil and to get it out of there to the greatest extent possible, and then try to come back with some kind of, you know,
So is there a plan for that
fragrant
recovery?
sumac or something like that.
Is there a plan for that recovery after the,
I don't think they had a plan for the recovery, and it wasn't in this grading plan. Now, he may have one, and we could ask him to include that if you want.
I mean, I think our goal is just to make sure that that slope stays stabilized.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
what we don't want is a bunch of silt to go down on top of the wall, of which the taxpayers have spent a lot of money on that wall along
Right,
Campbell
right.
Station. And what
Yeah.
we don't want is to go down there and change the drainage pattern and putting a lot of undue hydrostatic pressure on that wall, and that wall could potentially fail. So I think most importantly, to make sure the slope gets stabilized. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but the big challenge is, again, trying to get rid of that kudzu.
Yeah,
Because once it's rooted in, it's
going to be,
hard to get rid of.
yeah, it'll be difficult. I'm not sure if the applicant's here or not. I don't- Oh, yeah, there he is. Okay.
Matt Hatfield, Matt Hatfield, Hatfield and Allen.
Can you give us an address, please?
Yes, 400 West First North Street, Morristown, Tennessee. I don't think the owner is planning on removing all the kudzu. I don't think that's feasible. But I do think, and the owner's here and he can speak to that, but discussions with the owner is that the kudzu is going to be, they are going to try to move it back some for aesthetics, and that will then have a grass vegetative cover put in that place. But the short answer is no. All the kudzu is not going to be removed. That's just not feasible. But the owner does want to try to push it back a little bit, and because as you know, it just continues to expand and come in on the property. So this is I guess we're trying to, at the very least, try to stop it from going any further and maybe push it back a little bit.
I don't know if you heard, there were some commissioners that were kind of half-heartedly joking about it, but there is a guy that has had some pretty good success. This sounds crazy, but with a herd of goats.
I've heard, I've been told that.
It somehow, whatever the goats do,
Yes.
that they have a lot better success rate than Roundup does.
I've heard
And
the
so
exact same
and I
thing.
think it's economically fairly feasible.
Yeah.
This might be an opportunity to just talk to him and see what his thoughts are about the bees. I think it's
Yeah.
going to be, otherwise it's going to be a battle that you're always
Yeah.
going to be, your client's always going to be facing. It might, I don't have his name handy, I could probably get his name, but it does work, apparently.
Yeah, I've heard the exact same
Okay.
thing. I just didn't know how the town of Farragut would look at a herd of goats on the side of the hill,
We've
but,
had it at Vista.
Yeah, we've had,
They have chickens
It,
up at-
okay.
and it actually worked. They actually set up a little pen,
Yeah.
and then
They're contained.
the goats,
Eat their little hearts out
you know,
and go away.
harvest
Yeah.
an area, and then he moves the pen over to another area, and the goats harvest the next area. So,
Well,
The
you
city
know,
of Knoxville's used it.
it I mean,
Yeah.
as crazy as it sounds, but there has been success with
Yeah,
it.
all right. Well, the owner's here, so I'm sure he'll take that under advisement. Thank you. Any other questions while I'm up here?
Any other questions?
I'm not bothered by bringing in goats.
Okay, all right, all right.
I think it's a really interesting idea. You do know that the Farragut High School now has chickens and.
I know, I did not know.
Yes, they do. So we're going back to our roots apparently.
Okay, all right. Well, the goats don't crow in the morning, so I guess they're a little bit quieter than chickens. But, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to approve with the subject tos.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
A, discussion and public hearing on a variance from the requirement to construct a pedestrian facility along Dixon Road in
I
association.
think you, wait a minute, you got,
Number 7, please.
you're on
7?
7, actually. Number 7.
Number 7, and that,
Yeah.
wasn't that number
No,
7?
Da Vinci
That was
Designs.
number 8.
No, the facade.
Okay. Discussion and public hearing on a site plan for facade modification and lighting update associated with the Farragut Center at 11414 Kingston Pike, Zone C-1, Da Vinci Designs and Contracting applicant.
Yeah, this item involves some proposed upgrades to the Farragut Center building, which is just to the north of the post office. And basically, there's a few things they're proposing. It's a little bit hard to see with the images that were included in the packet. They are proposing to paint the existing brick, which is on 3 sides of the building, from obviously the brick color to a medium gray kind of charcoal. It's called Terratone color. It's pretty close to the color of the Domino's Pizza building to the east of this building, which is also owned by the same person. And then to replace the cedar shake awning with a metal awning, similar to what you see there on the screen. They also would be replacing or basically sleeving the support posts along the frontage. They're really kind of rails, metal rails right now, just kind of sleeving that and making it look more aesthetically pleasing. There is enough space between the stone and the face of the building for wheelchair access. That was one of the initial staff comments. And then, if you've been out there, they have some fluorescent tube lighting under the canopy, which is non-compliant, and they are proposing to incorporate LED lighting recessed up into the modified canopy, which obviously would be a big improvement to what's out there now. And it's these are the colors. There's 2 colors referenced as options: the colonnade gray and the useful gray. Again, it's one's a little bit darker on the left there. We can talk about that a little bit more in detail. Another thing on this center, just because of its age, is the signage on the building is also non-compliant. The building is in the mixed-use town center, and new signs are supposed to be backlit or externally illuminated. So we're trying to work, as part of this project, create a facade that would help tenants in the future to have less expensive signs to meet that requirement. So what we were hoping they would try to do here is something similar to what they did at the West End Center, where they incorporated some gooseneck lighting across the frontage, and that allowed the tenants, as they came and went into that development, to have a much less expensive, but still a very nice looking sign And it gives it that kind of different look and feel that we're trying to encourage in the mixed-use town center. The other option are the more expensive kind of backlit signs like you see at the Starbucks development or 35 North. And so, again, those are also permitted in the mixed-use town center, but we felt like now would be the time to try to maybe square up that facade and give them a little bit more options with signage moving forward, and then incorporate some of those more decorative lighting options as tenants transition in and out of this particular development. The other question, of course, is the color. Changing the color from brick to what they're proposing is going to be a very noticeable change visually. The brick's in pretty bad condition, and one of the reasons that they say they're wanting to paint it is just to basically, it's going to be hard to I guess the mortar between the bricks is gotten to pretty aged, and they're basically just trying to cover it up with this and give it kind of a different look and feel than what it's had up to this point. So that's kind of what they stated as their objectives for trying to paint it something that's pretty different from what they have right now. So that's some things to consider as part of this request. I mean, we certainly are glad that they're trying to make some upgrades. We're just trying to encourage them to try to think about their tenants and their signage in the future, and try not to create a situation where when they do have to replace signs, they have to get something like the Starbucks or, something that's going to be pretty more typical in a brand new building, so that's the staff's comments on this. And we did ask the applicant's designer to bring some materials and color board. I'm not sure if they have that. Okay, yeah. To kind of show you all a little bit better visually what this might look like, because again, it was a little bit hard for me to tell on what was included in their submittal. And then we'll need more detail on their light fixtures. I mean, I think the change that they're proposing with the lights is a good change, but we do need to know what the cut sheets are for these different types of fixtures and make sure that they're compliant with their outdoor site lighting requirements.
Brad Burns, Da Vinci Design and Contracting, 3916 Applewood, Knoxville.
If y'all have any questions for him, just now's the
You
time.
got show and tell, let's see
I've
it.
got a little show and tell. The lighting may still not be great for some of that, but I did do some brick samples. If you want me to just bring them forward, I guess. And actually showing the true color of the awning metal and choice of doing some of the post foot. This is the Colonnade Gray. It's got a little more, it's a little darker, a little red in it. And this is a little more cream color. They're still grays.
What's that compared to the one on the,
Next door
Yeah.
is actually more of this cream color.
okay,
And the striping and the trim is close to this terratone. But this would be the awning metal
yeah.
above. And either one actually looks pretty nice with it. I lean toward this. I've got Chapman Highway Project doing the same thing, so with a little darker charcoal, but almost the same color. And then having the
Yeah.
foot or the base in something that would go with either one. This is a composite stone look, so it's not going to have weight and things as well. There's a few trim areas around some of the old windows that has some rotting wood underneath the plate glass, so we could repair that, and this would match that little facade around the post. And most of the brick is, as it's been patched up and added, closing of windows, whatever, the brick lines aren't exactly the same, but there is the chance that on the one end that has the dry cleaners, that one end also sticks out This is the one end where Dr. Phil's office is, and there it has the thing. But on the other end,
over
that is the
here.
dry cleaners. That brick is actually not bad and has not been, I guess, messed with. I don't know if that would be an option to just keep some, change between them. If
I
the
think,
long section could
just be
done.
consistent.
Yeah.
And I'm not offended by you painting the brick.
That's fine.
It's an old
It just
building,
needs smoother,
this'll-
it just
yeah.
look a little more consistent.
ties it together with the one next to it.
The only thing we didn't get is, after trying to get a lot of these designs, they do have an old awning that's probably been hit a few times at the dry cleaners. We would have to submit a drawing of what that would be, but we would make it look just like the awning and a little bit more appropriate and taller and just tie in. So it would look exactly the same, but we need to get rid of that as well.
You're standing the awning up, right? Vertical.
Well, thing is, if we tear into any of that, that's gonna be a complete new construction. And then structural and things, and, at least on top of what this was already gonna cost, another 60,000-70,000. Just because, I guess the late 70s was when it was built. There'd be a lot more involved, and, I know that I can work with anyone that is going to change from the legal non-conforming signs to a new style that'll fit the ordinance, as far as working with the signage companies or
Is
something.
that, I think our concern is really, so here's, you can put that down, I'm sure it's heavy. I don't know if anybody wants to see
Well,
it.
what's the color on the left? My left, your right.
This
what-
is the useful gray,
Okay, thank you.
and it's a little more of a cream color, but
So here are some concerns. I know a lot of people would love to see all new buildings, but the fact of the matter is, these older buildings is what gives our small businesses, our first-time opening businesses, an opportunity to get in our mixed-use town center, which is what we need. So I'm not, I don't have a problem with these older buildings and us fixing them up. I think it's fabulous that they're working to improve the appearance. It's certainly, that's what happened with West End, and when he did West End, he filled up all of his buildings filled up. So that was good. There is a concern that, and I don't know if this planning commission ever wants to have this conversation, we have those old signs they're fairly inexpensive to make, but they don't meet our standards of our mixed-use town
the
center.
ones that are on are backlit.
Yeah.
So as far as trying to make sure everybody's talking the same thing, they are backlit as far as the panel
Yeah.
is translucent and
But
that. But I don't know about how it exactly fits the ordinance or.
Yeah.
I call those kind of more internally illuminated,
Yeah.
is how that is. That's kind of what we're trying to get away from in
Yeah,
the
cabinet
MTC.
style signs, and
That-
that's.
Sure. I'm
yeah.
going to let Louise go ahead and finish, then I've got a couple questions for
Our
Brad.
concern is, so now we have these small businesses want to come in, and now they're going to have to dump a lot of money into a sign that they weren't prepared to spend money on. So that is my concern, I guess, from a planning commission point of view. We're trying to get this more upgraded look, but are we imposing unnecessarily high costs because we can't get the gooseneck lights? I don't know how much it would be for them to be able to put that in. I don't.
Well, and if they did do a new, the individual, I don't know of all the terminology, but if you had the lettering sitting there, it needs to be lit by a gooseneck over the top, but there's also the options of those that light from the bottom, actually a small strip that's, you don't even really see very much, that lights the
Okay.
face of it instead of the gooseneck over.
So is that a possibility?
I mean, you get the same look, but you're really getting into a country look or whatever if you do all the goosenecks everywhere, and I've done that a lot on different states and
Go
different
ahead,
places.
Noah.
But,
Some
Brad,
options.
we'll kind of focus on signs for a second. Is the plan to take the existing signs that the tenants have today and reuse those signs on the new parapet or on the awning? Is that the
My
plan?
only scope was just to take them off,
Okay.
put on the new metal with the deteriorating shake, and then
Yep.
put them right back in their original
Okay.
spot.
Obviously, we're delighted that the building's getting updated. And I think that I agree with Louise. I think the paint and brick is a great way to kind of solve solve some of the issues and help kind of modernize the building. The signage, is it standing seam? Is that kind of what you're kind of planning on doing, that metal?
Standing seam, yes.
What, and again, you've kind of been given parameters, and you don't have a lot of flexibility, and we can understand this. Has there been any thought about, instead of trying to mount the signs on the standing seam, which you hate to, the whole purpose of standing seam is that you have no screws in it, so then you don't have any way for it to leak. As soon as you start attaching signs to it, you got to screw through the steel, and then you've got to fasten to, I don't know if there's wood framing under there or if they're metal studs or whatever, but there's some sort of framing under there that's under that, the substrate to that parapet. And then anytime that there's going to be a tenant changeover, you're going to have that sign come off and then a new sign come on, and then you got to, typically the holes aren't going to line up, so they got to figure out, okay, how do I go patch all these little holes in the standing seam? And that, it's done a lot. It's done all over the town. Typically, it's done like on stucco or brick or on the face of a building, and then they just do the best they can trying to patch the holes. What I'm trying to lead you to see if there's been any discussions with Dr. Fields and maybe the tenants. Have you thought about maybe hanging signs from the parapet where now I don't know exactly what the distance is from the sidewalk up to the soffit. If there's even enough room in there, maybe an older building, if it's only 8 or 9 feet, you don't have enough room.
9 to 10, and it
Well, so it's pretty
varies a little
tight. So
bit,
that would be, I mean, if 9 to 10 maybe, that you could get it to fit, but it would seem like it'd give a real classy look and then prohibit having to try to screw through all this new metal parapet. But if you hung signs, now quite frankly, a lot of the signs that you have are the older kind of can style signs that are internally illuminated with the Lexan, kind of plexiglass covers. A lot of those signs probably you couldn't reuse them trying to hang those signs down. But here's an opportunity. I know there's expense to it. I know that either the landlord or the tenant, somebody's got to foot the bill for it. But it sure would be a great opportunity to figure out another way to do the signage versus what's there today. And again, we're encouraging you, we want you to, and Dr. Fields, I don't know if Dr. Fields is here, but we want you to make the investment in this because it's in a great location. It's a great older building. And like Louise says, it does lend itself to, more affordable space than maybe the new buildings around the town of Farragut can have. And so I think there's a real need for this for the businesses in the town of Farragut. But I'd hate for all these signs to be stuck and then everybody's screwing through this brand new parapet that you've just installed, and then anytime there's a tenant changeover, they've got to pull the sign, and then, then I guess.
I believe there are standoffs with the standing seam, and you may have to make sure that you use the proper height when you start.
So you're saying
actually clip to the seam instead of actually going.
So you're saying you
penetrating.
basically pull off the little batten, pull the batten off,
Something of that nature.
attach it, so you're not
Right.
drilling through.
I think
There'd be a lot of
I think
education
that
that you'd have to do
yeah.
to the sign company. There's about 3 or 4 different sign companies around Knoxville that primarily do everybody's commercial signs, and you really have to try to educate those guys. Hey, don't screw through the face of this steel. I mean, that's probably one of the problems why the Cedar Shake is, because everybody, has tenant changeovers, they go up there and they beat it all up after a lot of years. It'd be great. Again, you don't have a lot of flexibility of where you could place a sign, but I would encourage you if there was a way, and I think it'd be real classy if you could hang a sign and then have the gooseneck lights come out over the top. And it kind of gives you, and it ties in with the MUTC a little bit better than, internally illuminated. Doing backlit on this would be real difficult because you've got a plane that's laid back. It's not on a 90, and I'm not sure what degree it's on, but it's basically running with the same degree that the existing parapet is. And so trying to do backlit would be difficult, but trying to update some of the signage would be awesome. I mean, and there are some signs over there that are more modern signs that are probably more in compliance with what the MUTC has today versus some of the old signs are kind of grandfathered in. But if you felt like you had room, and again, I don't want you to have to go back and redesign, and I'm sure not trying to create a big financial hardship on anybody, but it is in the kind of what we consider the town center, and we're trying to encourage you to come up, thinking outside the box of ways to make an older building really look good. So I'll let you kind of just dwell on that for a second. The other question that I had is in the interior alleyway, which is up here, I guess kind of a covered courtyard is what's there. There's a bunch of 8-foot fluorescents that go all the way back. Were you planning on pulling those 8-foot fluorescents out? I mean, you really don't notice them until at night. You drive by at night.
Right now, I was just going to concentrate on the awnings. It's about 420 feet. I've already been thinking about what to do with that. It's steel trussed through there, and honestly,
Yeah.
the quick fix would be to raise those up where there's never any sideline light coming off of it for the interim.
Yeah.
But that is all open with the steel roof deck
It is, yeah.
showing and all that, so not necessarily as many options as just placing a nice flush,
Well, there might be something that's more of an LED light, that's some sort of like self-contained surface mount fixture that you could do in lieu of the
And something
of the
that would
fluorescents.
actually hang up above it. Those units right now are absolutely on the bottom of those steel trusses, so that's why they hang down so low. But there's all of the space in the cavities in between those that you could hang up or bring up whatever appropriate lighting, and would get it out of line of sight, and it would still have a downlight. You probably could do an actual can light fixture, which we don't use anymore, but an actual can light fixture that would look appropriate and could be set.
Kind of recessed up into the bar joist.
And up inside the joists, where it wouldn't be, it would still be downlight, and you would not see anything on the side, which is, I think, the real goal.
I have a question about the painting of the brick and mortar.
Yes.
Mark said something about that the mortar was in kind of bad shape and the painting would help it. Is this a fix
You
for
can-
that? And
Right, it's really the generations of taking out a door, and the brick is not in line with such things and all. Some of the pointing of the mortar could be done if it's in really degraded or something, but it's all there. It's just, if you just cleaned it up, you may even make it more apparent that it's a little bit mismatched.
It would probably do
along
more
the way.
damage than it would.
Yeah, but the painting would actually seal it up, for that matter. The appropriate product and everything would seal it more. And that was the thought, is we pick the worst areas and then repoint them and make it as smooth as possible. That didn't have anything between those little brick samples, and I put in some just for the paint. So.
You spraying?
A wood spray. We'd be doing all the cleaning and so forth as far as scope of work, doing all the cleaning, get it. There's a lot of roof tar in places for reasons and things too. Everything is wood structure. The awning is wood structure, and even all the sides and underneath all the glass plate windows. So a lot of that, you don't know I know what to expect, but I don't know everything that might come up. But to make everything consistent, and we will have to take out some of those short sections of the wood below the plate glass in places. And that was the thought, was repair it correctly, flash it, and put it on the stone that would just tie it all together as an option.
anybody else have any more questions?
I might encourage you, on some of those areas that you feel like need to be repaired, maybe under old openings, since you're painting the brick, it might be easier just to go up and put a thin brick on and then paint the thin brick. My thought is, if all of a sudden you got all this painted brick, and then you've got certain areas that you're putting on the thin stone to try to remediate the areas where there's some wood damage, you might want to think about, you could take some half-inch Durarock or Hardy Backer, put it up there, and which you're probably gonna have to do for stone anyway, and then just put thin brick up, assuming it flushes out with the face of the other brick, and then paint all the brick the same color. Otherwise, you might end up with this kind of splotch of, you've got this little area. You might be drawing attention to these areas more with the stone than you would be just putting a thin brick veneer on it and then painting the brick. Just food for thought, that's all.
And this new product of the stone actually nails on in place. It doesn't require even attaching it.
Yeah, we've seen it advertised on TV.
So, okay. As seen.
I'm going to make a motion to approve. Do we have any more questions?
So the
What
plan
about
with
the facade,
ultimately
yeah?
with signage,
Yeah.
obviously, if there's tenant changes, those got to come back to the VRB. But, and again, what I don't want to do is I don't want to penalize them saying, hey, we love what you're doing, this is great, you're taking an older building, you're making it look better, and by the way, we're going to make you do all this other stuff. So I really don't want to do that. But what is the staff's thinking about how to address when there's tenant changeovers with signage? And kind of how have y'all treated some of the new tenants the past few years with the MUTC signage requirements?
Well, I mean, some of them have had to buy some pretty expensive signs, really.
Yeah, Hurricane did.
But is that
Still in the
something that,
house, isn't it?
instead of making them address it, that we should address that?
Yeah, I mean, we
Is
can
there
look
a-
at that. The objective was just to have, the signage would be one element of the mixed-use town center to give it a kind of different look and feel. The type of signs they have in this particular center are the cabinet box, cabinet signs, and those are specifically not allowed in the mixed-use town center. So they're all legal grandfathered signs. And what we were just trying to encourage was, since you're going to be going through this renovation, to try to look at setting up an approach to where when tenants do come and go, that the signage that they put up is not that expensive, and you still get that kind of look and feel that we're trying to encourage, in the town center.
So
Part of the
if
town.
there's a new tenant or an existing tenant who wants to change their sign, are those signs going to be brought into compliance with MUTC? Is that the objective here?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what we've been doing.
Okay.
Yep.
Happened, yeah.
And you can see it slowly happening.
I mean,
It just
it'll
takes a
look
while.
kind of odd on this center, because, you'll have the cabinet signs, and then the newer ones will be something very different. So hopefully, we would hope that they would incorporate something similar to what they did at West End, because the signs in there are pretty inexpensive, but because of the way they did it and the
On the one
gooseneck
side.
lights.
Yeah,
Yeah,
on the one
it
side.
looks really nice. And we tried to encourage them to do that on the other one, but they didn't, so.
I'm going to say this, ultimately, we don't own the building. This guy owns the building, and he is trying to upgrade this building, and this is his approach. I think you can communicate to him what our concerns are, but ultimately, he's upgrading a building, and this is how he wants it to be upgraded. And I'm struggling with telling him, oh, you can't do that because
I agree.
And I may like to look at a few more options with some of the sign companies, and also get back into designing it in such a way that, just off the cuff, there's a few places to actually, this is the only section above this tenant space that this will go, therefore it wouldn't be so evasive to put a new sign up every time, if that's the case. Maybe a platform, as it were, to come down and actually get a little bit of both worlds. Somewhere in the middle, that maybe it's not recreating the entire structure and all, but also get closer to give everybody somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But maybe some options I can try to come up with quickly before any of this would take place to say, yes, if we go this route, and then here's an option, and they probably need to stick with any tenant that comes in, you need to follow this
Yeah.
option, and
Yeah.
maybe even have that set up with a company that's willing to work
With
with
him,
that
yeah.
too.
And just so you know, we are deeply appreciative that the property owner are taking these steps. We think it's going to be good for his business, but it's certainly all good for the heart of our town
I
as
worked
well.
on some of his old stuff before years ago, so I got called in after needing some help, so that's, I'll try to bridge the gap with everything.
Any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the site plan.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. Brett?
Item number 8, discussion and public hearing on a variance from the requirement to construct a pedestrian facility along Dixon Road in association with a re-subdivision of Lot 2R and Lot 1. parcels 104.06 and 104.07, tax map 151 of the Tucker Montgomery subdivision, 516 Dixon Road, zoned R-1, 7.99 acres, Braxton, Himes, Norville, and Poe applicant.
Yeah, this item involves, really the only reason it's before you is because they've requested a variance from the requirement in our subdivision regulations to construct a pedestrian facility along a non-local street when you have a subdivision of property. This is actually just really a redivision of two relatively large tracts. Basically, this property to the south is acquiring about an acre from this property, and so basically that's all that's happening here. So due to the minor nature of this re-subdivision, they requested the variance to not have to construct a pedestrian facility along this frontage, which is about 875 feet. The staff is supportive, certainly, of that variance request because, again, you go back to the rough proportionality. The requirement to put that in is certainly not proportionate to what they're requesting at this time. Obviously, if they further subdivided that and did something different, then that would have to be revisited. But we do support the variance. We would recommend that, similar to what we've done with other rural kind of lots recently, that they go ahead and plat a 20-foot pedestrian facility easement across the frontage just behind the right-of-way. We did that at Union Road and also on Boring Road with a couple of re-subdivisions. And that way, if there's ever a need to put a walking trail or sidewalk across the frontage, there'd be more flexibility to work that in, work around certain improvements that might be in that space. There are walking trail sections to the north, about 1,000 feet to the north. You have a trail that parallels part of Dixon Road that was constructed as part of Rockwell Farm, and it actually has there's two pedestrian crossings of Dixon Road from that trail, both into Summer Oaks and to Steeplechase. So it's not like there wouldn't be a potential for there to have a walking trail or sidewalk at some point in the future. It's just at this time it would not make sense to build that on these frontages because it wouldn't go anywhere, and again it would be a lot of cost for just basically re-subdividing and adding an acre to an existing piece of property. So the staff does recommend approval of the variance. We'll need to take action on it first, and then we'll take action on the plat. We recommend approval of the variance due to the minor nature of the subdivision and the amount of pedestrian facility that they would have to construct in relation to that.
Mark, haven't we been down this path on this piece of property once before?
Not this one that I'm aware of.
I think most of what we dealt with on Tucker Montgomery's was to the south of this,
That's part of Sassafras
which is
Meadows.
adjacent to it, but directly to the south of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually, this road here is the one that was built with Tucker. So these are really not, these were actually part of a subdivision that was prior to Sassafras Meadows. It was part of Tucker's larger piece of property. So that's how they basically got created.
Does the applicant doesn't have a problem with the 20-foot wide pedestrian facility easement?
I haven't heard from them in that regard, so I don't know the answer to
Have
that.
somebody here?
Yeah, we got a representative.
Oh, yeah, I think they do have a representative. I don't know if they have somebody here, I think, but
Did the applicant want to speak to this?
we were just following what we've done
Yeah.
here recently. It'd still be their property, but it'd just be an easement. May never be used, frankly. It just depends on,
Yeah.
what happens in the future, but we're just trying to think about it and plan ahead, just like we did in Boring Road and Union.
And the 20-foot easement would be part of the variance, or is that part of the plat?
That would be, no, it's part of the plat.
Okay.
Katie Wozek, 4334 Paper Mill Drive. I work for Batts and Himes, representing the owner of this property. As far as I know from just speaking with the representative of the client, I'm not sure he would be in favor of the 20-foot easement. I guess, do you want to, yeah, if you want to go maybe into more detail about maybe why he would not be in favor.
I mean, that was part of the variance rationale for it, was to have that, to have that easement, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kathy Morrison. I'm representing my son Jared Corby. I live at 516 Dixon Drive Road. Jared's out of town. He couldn't be here tonight. He has purchased 516 Dixon as his forever home, and he wanted to expand his property. Therefore, he did purchase 514 Dixon in order to do that, because they wouldn't sell him just 3/4 of an acre. As far as putting, I'm not sure I understand what a variance is as part of the problem here. I know he didn't want a sidewalk, which is what this is all about. And I personally wouldn't want to walk on a sidewalk up down Dixon Drive. Cars fly up and down that road. It's if anything, a walking trail would be better suited behind the property on the east side of the property than on the west on the road. But I can't speak for my son. I just don't know that he would agree to 20 feet more. I mean, what does this entail? I don't understand.
Still be his property. It's just, you already have a 10-foot easement anyway. It's
Okay,
just
right.
It just basically is another 10 feet. And it may never be used, frankly. It's just that if there were ever, it'd probably be part of improvements to Dixon Road itself.
To make Dixon bigger or something?
Yeah.
Well,
there
he's
would be
he's
some
just
space.
spent a lot of money on new fencing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if this is just because Dixon Road isn't on our,
No,
we're not looking at fixing Dixon Road anytime soon.
Okay.
So if in fact we went to improve Dixon Road, if there was any damage to his property in improving Dixon Road, we would make that, the town would make that right in the construction of it.
I see.
And so you're purchasing right-of-way. This easement is, basically what we're requiring is that there an easement shown on the plat in case we get to that point where we ever improve Dixon Road. And that would be, I could see that being the only time we would put a sidewalk there, as if we went to improve it, and that would happen.
Now, does that easement go up to the north past 514 Dixon? Because he's getting ready to sell that property.
It would affect both these lots. It's
Both the
basically
lots,
just,
okay.
it just comes straight from the right of way,
Okay.
20 feet out. But
Okay.
again, it doesn't include any improvements or anything really at this time, and it may not for decades,
Yeah.
who knows?
Explain to her what an easement actually is.
Well, easement's typically still owned by the property owner, it's not public property. And it's just an area that, within which there's certain rights that are allocated to different entities for different purposes, like every property has typically drainage and utility
Right,
easements.
easements between properties
You've
and
already
road
got,
frontage and.
you've already got one, a 10-foot one all the way through here anyway. And then I think there's a walking trail easement that was platted with Tucker's right through here.
At one point in time,
That
I
goes
don't know
back.
that if it still is or
Yeah,
not.
it's platted,
Is it?
yeah. But
Now,
again, it's
he has
just,
sold those lots back behind,
right.
that.
No, it's still there, yeah.
Okay. all
But it's
right.
the same logic that, it just gives some options and some flexibility in the future. just gives more space within which work could be done for that type of facility. It doesn't mean that there's going to be one or we'll have one
Okay.
planned.
Let me ask you this, does this have to be done, I feel uncomfortable, you feel like you're communicating through your son, and he may have a different understanding. Does this have to be done tonight?
Well, he's getting ready to put the other
Put it on the
property on
market,
the
so he
market.
wants
So
to
we need
subdivide it.
we need to
Okay.
have the survey map available for a potential buyer. And he will take any recommendation from his surveyors and the firm that is representing him tonight. And I appreciate your clarification and your time. Thank you.
And I'll say this, I'm not comfortable waiving the easement because we've required it on other ones, and if we set that in motion, we're setting a precedent that we can't claw ourselves back from. All I can do is tell him we are not looking at Dixon Road anytime soon.
I think based on your clarification, we're in agreement with staff recommendation.
We actually required a covenant on some of those other ones, and I'm not recommending that here because they have a lot more frontage and they're already existing houses,
Yeah.
whereas those is a different situation.
Does the applicant know that we've actually required in this scenario, we've actually required the property owner to construct the pedestrian facilities? And we're actually saying, hey, we just want to reserve the right in the future.
Yeah, right.
That if, whether it's 10 years or 100 years from now, that if there's a pedestrian facility that's deemed to benefit the public, then the town would have the right to be able to construct that.
We'd have to construct it.
At taxpayer
Yeah,
expense.
That's right, yeah,
So.
that's right. Yep. It's actually less restrictive than the ones on Boring Road because the covenant there actually bound those property owners
To do it.
in the future to pay for it.
To actually foot the bill.
I looked at that and
This
thought
one don't.
about it. I didn't think I thought that was a little overkill
Well,
on this
these are two
particular-
individual lots, and all we're really dealing with is they're moving a lot line.
That's right.
So
That's
they're
right.
not creating a new developable lot.
I think the easement is reasonable, but
I
the
think so,
other
too.
one, I just didn't feel like that would even be a reasonable thing to ask.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance from the requirement to build any pedestrian facilities on Dixon Road due to the minor nature of this re-subdivision.
I'll second.
Including the.
Well, I think the easement's actually gonna be
Yeah.
in the plat approval, so we'll do that. I think that would be in the next motion.
Well, it's
Okay.
part of the rationale
Part
for
of the rationale.
granting the variance.
The
is that
reasoning.
You go ahead and provide
And that a
that.
pedestrian facility
Okay.
easement is granted.
I'll amend my motion to also include, not only is it the minor subdivision, but that there is a pedestrian facility easement that's being required as part of this plat.
Okay.
You gonna second that?
I did second, yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you all for coming in tonight.
On the plat,
More item, we need to give them one more
On that
action
plat
item.
itself, basically just including in a numbered note the action taken at this meeting on the variance request so that there's a record on the plat of that, and then showing the 20-foot pedestrian facility easement and then obtaining the required signatures. And subject to those three items, the staff recommends approval of the plat.
Move to approve with the subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item number 11, discussion on a site plan for grocery store and shops for a portion of parcel 32 and parcel 33, 72 through 74 and 76, tax map 151 Northwest, intersection of North Watt Road and Kingston Pike, Zone C-1, 10.3 acres, Shod Companies applicant.
Yeah, this is actually a site plan just for workshop purposes. It's a pretty large piece of property and fairly complex site plan. And I think the applicant wanted to get some feedback on some of the more significant items from their perspective. But this is kind of the property. It's at the northwest intersection of North Watt Road and Kingston Pike. It's basically all of this here. Pretty good amount of land, about 10.3 acres. What they're proposing, just to go through that first, they wanted to get some feedback on the general layout. Their proposed access is to Kingston Pike, which we'll go back to and look at that. They're doing some access modifications to the rural metro access off of North Watt Road, which is actually owned by the same property owners. And then accesses both pedestrian and vehicular to adjoining properties, and have a discussion on that. Basically, as proposed, they've got a roughly 48,000 square foot grocery store here. They've got about a 10,000 square foot retail building that's attached to the grocery store, and then 2 out parcels at this point. One of the things that they're requesting feedback on, we don't have a traffic impact study yet, but they are proposing, down here's the traffic signal at Watt Road and Kingston Pike. Roughly about 270 feet to the west, they're proposing, from that intersection, they're proposing a right in, right out here near the out parcel access. And then roughly 200 feet west of that, they have a full access that lines up with the Y12 access, which also serves to be as the access for the planned commercial development that's under construction to the south. As you may remember, Little Joe's worked out a land swap agreement. At some point, that access is going to go away, and they were able to tie that in to the Kingston Pike Village project. So just going back to that, since that is kind of a major discussion item, you can look at the overall development in the area. Their right in, right out would be, you know,
How far is that from the,
it's about 270 feet from the intersection of North Watt Road and Kingston Pike, so it's about right in there.
so we have a right in, right out at Walgreens and Costco. That Walgreens.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we have other right in, right outs.
Yeah. Just for comparison's sake, that one seems to work okay, so.
Yeah, they're just wanting, I think they want that just because of the amount of development and the out parcels to have the different options. It's just something that we need to look at because the western part of Kingston Pike is kind of obviously our most undeveloped commercial part of the town, and looking at where all these curb cuts are proposed, just like we did with the Temple project a couple months ago, is pretty important. Now the full access, this is the Y12 building here, and their full access is here. And their main access at the grocery store would line up with that. And then, of course, this access extends back to the south and would be the Kingston Pike access for all of this development. They also have, of course, the access to South Watt Road over here. So this one makes sense. We certainly understand that, lining that up. I think the question was whether y'all were comfortable with a proposed right in and right out to the east of that. And then, like I said, the access on Watt Road is pretty much where the existing rural metro building is here. One thing we would suggest and recommend is that they try to line that up to the greatest extent possible with Fleener. In the event that if Fleener ever were open back up, nobody's proposing that, but if Fleener were ever to open back up, that they would all line up. So that's one of the things that I think they wanted to get feedback on. Of course, the general layout's pretty traditional. I mean, they got the parking in the front. These are landscape areas. And of course, the building here in the back and all the truck delivery and loading area back here. One of the things that we talked about at the staff developer meeting that I think is critical, and they need to figure out how to do this, is making a walking trail connection from their development to the trail. There's a walking trail that runs through this general location at Bob Leonard Park, Mayor Bob Leonard Park, because that would definitely benefit both properties. You'd have people coming from the park over here, and then vice versa. You'd probably have people maybe employees on lunch break here at this grocery store. They want to get a walk-in. They don't want to have to walk along a major arterial. They want a little bit more, pleasant experience, and they may want to choose to go back here and get on the walking trail at Mayor Bob Leonard Park. So they're not showing the connection there, but that is something that the staff would be pretty adamant about having that. We also looked at and talked a little bit about a vehicular connection here to the Ag Pro storage area. It's always good to look at connections. That really, to me, doesn't really do much. There wasn't really any provisions made for Ag Pro to tie into, for these two properties to tie in together in a vehicular manner. There is a sidewalk connection, so even if you did connect here, it wouldn't really go anywhere. So I'm not sure that really makes a whole lot of sense. But here you can see on the aerial that walking trail at Mayor Bob Leonard Park that kind of runs just to the north, kind of parallel with the north part of this development. Again, tree cover is another thing that is very important here. There's most of the significant trees are kind of along the periphery. So we want to try to protect the trees along the park border. There's also residential property right here. It's an existing residence, so that means that there's a 35-foot buffer in this general area. They do show some grade work and improvements in part of that, which would not be permitted, so they will have to make some adjustments there.
Put a trail in the 35-foot buffer?
You can run it through in a perpendicular manner. So this is not a required buffer back here because this is not residential. But this is residential, and this section has a 35-foot buffer where their property abuts the residential property.
Okay, so the other side,
Right down there.
that's an idea, yeah.
We have to extend our part, of course, to tie in, but they need to provide for some kind of connection there.
Well, and Commissioner Green's pointing out, not putting it closer to the residential side, but putting it closer to the,
Maybe over in this area,
yes.
in the western.
Western property line.
Yeah, that's possible. We haven't really gotten any to the specifics yet. That is kind of in their proposed loading area over here. And having it over on this side would be closer to the out parcels and the retail space.
So that's really an option of theirs, thinking about long-term, which is more convenient, but then again, which is more feasible.
I don't know enough about, I've walked the property, but it would seem to me that having it probably kind of more in the middle, where if anybody's here, let's say an employee that's working here at one of these whatever businesses, and they want to get a walk-in over at the park, it's a little bit more centrally located somewhere through here. We keep it obviously out of the buffer strip because we have to. In this case, we may want to bring it out, kind of meander it up through this
I
way.
assume there's a plan to put a sidewalk on the access point off of Watt Road,
Yeah.
because there's a pedestrian facility that comes through there from the cleaner.
Yeah, and that's another thing we'll look at here in a minute. And then as these out parcels are developed, there's a sidewalk that stops here. We'd require that sidewalk to be brought in
Yeah.
to those developments as those are developed. We just don't know how that would occur, so it would make more sense to put that in when those are actually developed. The Watt Road access, is 2-lane currently. This would add a lot more trip generation to that access. So they're proposing like a stall area, an area basically to where people can't be within, so that if there is an emergency response vehicle can get out and not have a conflict with customers
Kind
that
of
are.
like where they have it at on Weisgarber, at Paper
Yeah,
Mill.
I think there's one, I've seen another one here somewhere.
What's the
Might be one on
crosshatch there?
Campbell Station.
Is that a raised,
The what now?
this crosshatch in the middle.
In the
so-
entrance to where the rural metro
It's
is,
not a lane.
there's a
That's just
crosshatch
a
in there.
median.
What is that?
That's just a median.
A raised
Is it a
median?
median, or is that just a painted road?
I don't remember.
Good
I
to
don't know,
have it as
Rod.
emergency.
Yeah, Bud, if you might, I don't remember that, whether that's, I don't think it's raised. Because it's such a tight turn there. I think it's just a,
Well, that's probably how the delivery trucks to the grocery store are gonna come in, is off of that, so they need to think about turning
They've
radius
got
and making it a wide turn.
they've got a dual turn here to where it's kind, we did this at Parkside Drive to where we have a much wider turning radius for trucks, but then you have a tighter radius for most vehicles so that they're slowing down, because this is a pedestrian crossing. And really with all this improvement here, the pedestrian crossing is over 70 feet, so it's a pretty long
That's a
crossing.
pedestrian
Well, my thought is that if there are people stopped exiting the project there onto Watt Road,
Watt Road.
both lanes, if that is a crosshatch lane, then maybe an emergency vehicle could use that crosshatch to get out if there was cars stopped there. That was my thought. And maybe that's what the plan is. I don't know. That's what I was
I
wondering.
think he's shaking his head. Yes, that's it.
Yeah,
We got there. I was like waiting. Yay, yes.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but that was Bud Cullum, 6312 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee. We met extensively with the fire chief in rural metro and went back and forth, and that is exactly what that is. And all of that came out of not only the grocery store's wishes and just good engineering, but also with the comments from the fire chief. So that's exactly what that is. Anyway, sorry, but I thought it might be helpful if I went ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would say
You're guessing.
when we circulate these site plans, we have the fire inspector always look at them, or fire marshal. And then he had some comments. In fact, he came up with that in talking with his response team with that kind of holding area there.
I will say that this is going to be a very high pedestrian area, I think, with the park there, with the multifamily coming in, and people using those trails back there off of Fleener. You're going to see a lot of people biking to get to something. This will be like the new destination. I'm sure that there's restaurants that are probably looking at this. And so paying attention to pedestrian safety and pedestrian access is important, certainly for the well-being of your development, but also for what the goals are for that area. So
I'll let Mark finish, and then if
I
you
think
have other
that's
questions.
mostly what I had. They have some underground detention in this general part of the parking lot that they're proposing. We don't have the drainage calculations yet. I think they were trying to, again, get the planning commission's sense of the general layout, and if y'all are reasonably comfortable, especially with their accesses along Kingston Pike, because these will require a variance. This one will, for sure, because it's not 400 feet from the intersection or the full access to the west. And then this access, even though it does line up, is not 400 feet to the access to the west of it. So both of those require a variance due to that spacing issue.
You think we'll ever have another piece of property that won't have a variance?
It's hard, I'll tell you, it's hard to do it when you're looking at both sides of the road. It is a challenge. I mean, it's tough. I mean, we just try to do the best we can. Obviously, the full access to me is a no-brainer. That probably will be signalized.
Yeah, that's what I was getting rid of.
This here, I understand the logic of it from the applicant's perspective. It's just something that, you all need to understand and be comfortable with it. It is a right in, right out, so theoretically people shouldn't be turning east to go east. They have other options if they want to do that, especially if this becomes signalized here. You'd be kind of foolish to, though we see a lot of foolish
can't solve stupid.
foolish work out there on the roads, but yeah, it seemed to me that if you want to go east, you'd come up here if this is signalized, or even come out here to a signalized condition.
When you look at this, this is very similar in layout to what we did at Costco and Walgreens and
It probably
that
is.
out parcel.
Very
The only-
similar.
The only difference is, and I'm wondering if that will end up being signalized at some point, the Watt Road access. I'm not
Oh.
gonna say it out loud,
Yeah, I
because
don't
I
know
don't
about
like the
that.
idea of connecting that road out there, but,
Yeah, this
Yeah.
probably will because of what's going on, not only on this side, but on the south side.
yeah.
You know, that's gonna have a lot of trip generation over there.
I'm not bothered with that right in, right out there. I think it'll make it easier to access those out parcels right there.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we just raise it as a discussion item.
It also helps if people are going in off Kingston Pike.
Yeah.
It won't stack up at a red light potentially down here
Yeah.
and back up to the,
Yeah,
toward Watt Road too.
They may just want to
Take
make
some
that, and
pressure
we,
off
we deal with this a lot, just try to make that a little bit more pronounced. So
or
that
raised.
somebody is more discouraged to try to go east out of there, even though they may still try to do it.
I think every day I see somebody at that Walgreens
At
on
the
Smith
Wal-
Road
yes.
making that sharp turn
I
every
see
day.
that, yeah.
And I see people all the time going into the Waggle there on,
That's what I'm talking about.
that's, an interesting,
I've got a couple of observations. First, I do support the right in, right out. I think it makes a ton of sense. I think it's good for circulation. The second observation I had is may want to evaluate the need for a decel lane on Watt Road that might, with more traffic coming in, especially that part of the county, and some anticipated development happening down at the interstate and the Watt Road, it might make sense to have a decel lane. And again, we're still in the conceptual design right here, and so we're real early on. Your traffic study may yield some more information that would give you a little bit better idea if that's needed. And then the last thing that I had is the Wisham family is here, and they actually own the residence that we've been talking about. And under normal circumstances, when we're dealing with a concept plan like this, or even a site plan, we would require some sort of design for future connectivity to a adjacent parcel. And we've talked about to the parcels to the west, and we've talked about pedestrian connectivity to the park. But I wouldn't mind, and Mr. Wisham, I hate to put you on the spot, but this would be an opportunity that it would make sense. This commission actually supports vehicular connectivity. So if you're moving from one business over to another business, i.e., quite frankly, I think it'd be naive to think that your property is going to stay residential forever. That eventually someday it'll be commercial, and if there's some sort of design that needs to be incorporated on the first part, which we do all across the town of Farragut, where we have designs for connectivity that are there, and maybe today they're just stubs, and maybe for the next year they're just stubs, but then they allow some sort of connectivity in the future upon development of your property. This would be the time to say, hey, this might be something that would make sense for us, or no, we're going to remain residential for here for many, many years. But this is a concept plan, and the more direction that we can give the applicant about what this commission's expectations are, the better tools that they have in their tool bag to try to incorporate some of these designs into ultimately what their civil package looks like when they submit for their more formal site plan. So I hate to put you on the spot, Mark, but if you have any thoughts one way or another about what future connectivity, if that's something that's desirable to you or it's not, it'd be nice to have it on the record one way or the other. But again, we kind of need you to come up to the microphone. I should have given you a warning when I saw you here earlier tonight. But
Actually, Deborah did sign up.
Okay.
I don't know if she wanted to speak, but she did
Okay.
sign up. Deborah Wilkerson. You want to speak?
yes. we need
yeah,
to-
I know
we
it's
need
all
you to
family
come-
property. I know Mark and
Come to the
Leanne for
microphone.
many years, and I just wanted to give y'all, make sure you had an opportunity to express concerns or support or whatever. Obviously, this is exciting for West Farragut. It's You know, this was the old Farragut ditching property for many years that was dilapidated, and it's exciting to see it redeveloped.
We're anxious to see what they find. You know?
Who knows?
The buried, what's buried?
We can get your
Yes,
name and address for the
I'm Deborah
record.
Wilkerson. I live at 209 North Watt Road. My sister and I and our father, we own the property. So as of right now, we have a party that's at home who is not really wanting to change yet, but we're thinking. We've all talked. So that's all I can say for right now.
Well, so what we're talking about tonight to try to give the applicant some direction is typically when there's a new development comes before us, we require some sort of plan for future connectivity to adjacent properties.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that there's going to be any construction on your property. It actually doesn't affect you today in any shape, fashion, or form. But what it would do is upon redevelopment of your property, if it stays residential, connectivity doesn't make any sense. But if it redeveloped as commercial, we would want to see some tie-in where a car could drive from your property over onto this property that we're talking about tonight without having to exit onto Watt Road, go down, and turn back in. So that's basically what I kind of wanted to throw on you guys. If that was something that you felt like that made a lot of sense, that future type of connectivity were to be eligible in the future, this would be the opportunity for us to say, hey, to ask the developer and the applicant to make some sort of design decisions to be able to connect best to your property. Again, it doesn't mean that there would be any construction on your property. It wouldn't require any easements from you. It would require absolutely zero from you, other than if we had your opposition to it tonight, it would help us make decisions, or if we had your support for it tonight, it would help us make decisions.
Right now, we can't give either way.
Okay, so you're not ready to make any kind of decisions or support or opposition one way or the other. Again, I can't remember how yours is zoned, but it's whether it's zoned residential or commercial. The reality is you're going to be surrounded.
It's going to be commercial.
Yeah, it's going to be commercial someday, whether we like it or not, and so it makes sense. But maybe it's premature to do that. It sounds like you've already had some discussions with the applicants, but generally speaking, we're going to want to see connections, at least eligibility for future connections to some of these other properties. We've already talked about dealership and so forth, and that one's probably not a good candidate the way that their property's already built out. But yours, would be a blank canvas someday that might be a good candidate for some connectivity.
No, can I make a recommendation or a suggestion? Because really, the plat note needs to show on the rural metro property, where the rural metro is right now, to say, can we make some kind of plat note that please planning for future connection?
Absolutely.
Or,
So the applicant is going to have to replat all this property. I'm not sure if you noticed. It looks like that the rural metro parcel that's sitting there today is going to get reconfigured to be able to accommodate the area behind the shops. And so it does look like at some point the applicant's going to present us with a brand new plat that's going to dissolve property lines and I'd probably address some other issues with re-subdividing the property. And that's definitely something, but what I was trying to do since you guys were here, just trying to get your feedback. If you are completely in opposition to it, then we probably wouldn't force feed it on the applicant to make any conditions or any kind of anticipated future connections. Can I say? Absolutely. Yeah, Mark, if you don't mind saying your name and address for the record.
Mark Wisham, my wife is a partner, Leanne, on the 205 Watt Road address. At this time, they have no plan to rezone it from residential. I think they would entertain a conceptual drawing of something that may work in the future.
is it commercial or residential?
Well, there's residential
That's what I
R1.
thought. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no time, you're not looking to rezone it commercial, do you mean, or you
We
look
would
to?
entertain.
We're not looking to do it at this point,
But at some point you may. Well,
We
you
might,
guys, I
yes.
mean, you're across the street from commercial and you're surrounded by commercial, so it would make sense if you ever went to rezone.
But this is something that part of the concept plan and the ultimate site plan, there's need to be some accommodations if that property for connectivity, and that's all. I didn't mean to take up so much time trying to discuss this, and I apologize for putting you guys on the spot, but it wasn't on the concept plan, and I think it's something that's worth talking about. And the applicant may already have an idea of saying, hey, you know, if this was ever a future phase of the project, we've got an easy plan, the topography matches. You know, there may be some other easy ways that, you know, a lot of times we require either a platted easement or something, especially if there's topography challenges. I think that property's reasonably flat, so it'd probably be pretty easy to connect it. You know, is it the best place to connect it back behind the shops? I don't know, but I know they've spent a lot of time and effort and dollars designing the position of the grocery store, so I don't want to tell them, hey, you got to, you know, realign the grocery store. But, you know, connectivity has been a big philosophy that this commission has supported for a lot of years, and I just wanted to bring up the discussion. So we do appreciate you guys coming up and sharing some of your thoughts.
All right, thank you.
I have a real quick question of Mark. From the picture I saw there of the grocery store and the parking lot, are you okay with the number of parking spots there?
Yeah, I think they're right at they're pretty much at the requirement, I believe, as I recall. We have quite a few comments, so this is going to change a fair amount. I think we have you know, a few comments on the site plan and just more specific details on the layout and different things to think about. And so there's going to be probably some parking that would be converted to interior islands in some cases here to be consistent with our architectural design standards.
Are we ready to hear from the applicant? So
I think we
can understand
have,
what
but
their
yeah,
concerns are?
yeah.
Rodney or Bud, are there any other guidance items that we can help you guys with as you're working through some of these design elements? Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah,
is that the time?
Yeah, that's
Sure.
fine.
I'm on the record with my address, right? So, first of all, I want to say this. We have been talking with the Wilkerson family, and they have been very gracious. Obviously, they have concerns. They grew up there. I think there's some opportunities for further discussion with us on 3 or 4 points. So from that standpoint, I don't want to speak for them, but you may have put them on the spot a little bit, and I did not put them up to that, but blame no.
I've known Mark for a long time. He can get me afterwards.
But so from that standpoint, we're in discussions, and that as far as the vehicular access at some point, I think could be workable if it was workable for the Wilkersons. I think in the rear area, I'm not sure that's really where it would need to be. I think it's probably something, frankly, that would be down the road from a development standpoint. Even if the Wilkersons decided to rezone or sell and someone rezone, still may be down the road. But anyway, I don't think we have any opposition philosophically to it. It's just a matter of where the details would be.
What we wouldn't want you to do is come up with a plan and pigeonhole yourself with a design that would preclude you from vehicular connectivity.
Right. Frankly, the most likely scenario would be someday down the road when rural metro possibly moved on to bigger and better facilities, and the Wilkersons, either in conjunction with the Schad family or separate from the Schad family, or however it worked out, would maybe tie their parcel in with the current rural metro property and have vehicular access that way, and then stretch it on into the shopping center property. And I'd like to use that to segue a little bit into the rear part and also the pedestrian. And certainly we discussed the pedestrian access at the staff developer meeting, and we see the benefit. At the same time, the grocery store has some concerns about, although they love the idea of people coming from the park and purchasing merchandise from them, they also recognize that area in the back is a service area with truck traffic, and they want to keep safety paramount also. And the grades, when you just look at that, you think, boy, it ought to be real easy just to get a pedestrian path back there with all that space. When you start factoring in the grading plan, which Mark has up there now, it's not quite as easy. Personally, I've always thought that if there's a way to slightly regrade the western boundary line and have the entrance into the park along that route, I think it would be better because it spaces it away. You've already effectively got a sidewalk and pedestrian path along Watt Road from the park. So if you had it on the west side, you'd have your spacing maybe a little bit better, and you wouldn't quite as much be trying to have pedestrians going right back where semi-trucks are turning around and service trucks are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's something that obviously we still have to work on with the staff, but I did want to state our concerns. Mark talked about the vehicular access to the west, and that's really, not only would the grocery store not really be okay with that, but because it's already developed over there, I think everybody recognizes that maybe that's not the best idea. Obviously, one of the things, I'll get it out there, I don't want to take them off the spot and put them back on the spot, but we have a 35-foot landscape buffer issue because of the residential land touching the commercial land. And you're looking at the plan, and we kind of have it shoehorned in there, and we have a pinch point. And that's one of the things, I'll call it an opportunity, that we're discussing with the Wilkersons. And I don't want to, at this time, since this is just a discussion point, I don't want to put them any more on the spot than they already are. I think that there will be something that will be able to be worked out that will be mutually satisfactory. That's the goal right now, and hopefully that's their goal. I'm trying to think, Rodney, were there any other concerns? Parking was asked about. The grocery store has a minimum parking spaces. We're just meeting that, and I think that happens to coincide with the town's ratios, so that worked out okay.
I think that's what I remembered. It was.
And then I addressed the part that the entrance from Watt Road has been pretty thoroughly vetted with Rural Metro and the fire chief himself. So we discussed the right in, right out. Anything else?
I do want you to entertain that decel lane on Watt Road.
Thank you.
Okay.
That we have just started the process of getting the traffic study done. And when you mentioned that, I mentioned to Rodney to take a note to have Cannon and Cannon will be doing the traffic study. And I was making note for them to study that issue also. I'm trying to remember, Mark, I apologize for not having it from me, but there were some other staff comments we discussed at the staff developer. Have we left anything out?
That's mainly getting that walking trail connection to Mayor Bob Lennon Park is a biggie, and I think that needs to be figured out somehow. I understand you don't want to put people in an unsafe situation, but it really does need to, because that kind of connectivity is very important, and people, this is a much more enjoyable walk back here to get onto this walking trail or somewhere as opposed to walking along a major arterial with all the traffic that you have along Watt Road, even though that is an option. This gives them another option that is perhaps a little bit more pleasant.
I'd support that pedestrian connection occurring on the west end of the property. I mean, I think that would be okay. And I kind of like the separation, because basically you would have connection back all the way on Harrison Road in Loudoun County coming from the park. And this is probably about equidistant from Harrison Road all the way to Watt Road. So I think having a somewhat linear pedestrian connection going across the western boundary to the park, I think that would be, at least is something that I would support.
My comment on that is I went out and walked it, and I think if you don't put a walkway there, there'll be a trail there.
Yeah.
That's what I think will happen.
Yeah.
There'll be a dirt trail there that people will walk, because it's kind of centrally located on the park, so you got
Right.
fields on the west side and you got fields on the east side. So if you don't put a trail there, there'll be one.
They'll create one.
So you might as well put a sidewalk there, figure out how to do that.
Where's the front door located at this building?
There's two front doors, pretty much right.
Is this
Right
a
in the
good
middle.
image
Yeah.
here?
This is the grocery store that's remaining unnamed.
Yeah.
So, and we have no idea who
I can't.
who that would be.
I think it's totally disguised. I don't think there's any way you could figure it out. I'm just not allowed to officially say it.
So yeah, It's, you got the pharmacy over here, and then here's that retail building. It's
Okay.
to the east. Mostly brick building. I mean, it's definitely meets the 75% net facade area.
We're open to waiving that if you want to reduce that, though.
Well, at least you can average it out here as opposed to the town center where every elevation has to be at least 75%.
No, this is, hopefully everyone's excited about the concept. The Schad family has held this property for many, many years, waiting for the right development. And the reason I'm standing here is simply because I'm not only am I friends with the Schad family and have done work with them for 30 years, but this particular unnamed grocery store I happen to do a lot of business with. So it all worked out.
We're excited.
Great.
Well, we would probably recommend maybe getting together with your team and talking through the staff's comments
Yeah.
before you come back to
We
the
will,
planning
and
commission.
I think it'll be helpful to get the traffic study, get that in
Yeah,
front
just
of you.
whenever y'all are ready. If I'm not sure if you'll be ready for the July meeting, but if not, we'll.
It's going to be nip and tuck, frankly.
Yeah,
That would be
that's
our
what
goal, but it's to get the traffic study, and, you know, we'd like to maybe have the drainage calcs at that point also, and to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. I know the Wilkersons were concerned initially and still want to put a keen eye, making sure that the drainage is working and it's not disadvantageous to them,
We'll
so.
probably just plan on August and just try to get together and get everything worked out so that when it does come to the planning commission, it'll be in pretty good shape.
I'm not going to give up on July yet, but
Well,
I hear you.
okay, it's up to
No.
you if that'll be a challenge.
It will, absolutely. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 12, discussion on adding the requirement for the concept plan in association with a rezoning to S-1 Community Service Zoning District.
Yeah, this is just a workshop discussion item. And this is really just looking at the question of whether we should require a concept plan as part of a rezoning request to the S1 district. The S1 district is really kind of an institutional zoning district, so it can have buildings that are pretty large in scale and could have potentially a significant impact. At the same time, this is also a zoning district that is intended to be a transitional. It's not commercial in nature, so it can be a district that you can transition from something more intense to a lower density residential development. So we thought that it might be useful to have a concept plan before a property is rezoned, and that way the community will kind of have a better understanding of how an applicant intends to develop the property, and they kind of get, you know, committed to something before the property is actually changed to allow, you know, buildings that could potentially be out of scale or out of character with their surroundings. So this is similar to what we already have in place with Town Center District and our PCD district, and then most recently, a couple of years ago, with the open space mixed residential that we developed. And the language would be pretty similar to what we did with the open space mixed residential, that if you get a concept plan, as long as you don't make any major changes to it, it can move forward. But if you do have some major changes, and we do clarify what that is in the actual ordinance, then it would have to go back through. Basically, the rezoning would revert back, and they would have to go back through the process again, and that's what we did with the open space mixed residential. The staff supported this concept, and we could probably put something together for a recommendation to the board if you all feel like this is a good idea.
The good news is we already have some language.
Yeah, we do.
It should be fairly easy to cut and paste.
I'm
and
hoping,
insert it
yes.
into this.
I'm hoping it will be, yes.
I support this.
I agree.
Okay.
I think it's a help for the developer. Going in, I mean, it's,
Community too.
yeah, it does.
When we approved the S1 for the villages, and I realized that
Yeah.
we didn't have a site plan requirement or a concept plan requirement for approval, that was a big project.
Yeah.
That
Not for the
you kind of-
rezoning, but they did have a concept
Yes,
plan
they
after it
did.
was rezoned.
But
yes.
it wasn't as part of a requirement as the
Right.
rezoning, and so we
That's
were
right.
kind of on a wing and a prayer, and that's probably not how we need to go into
Yeah.
those rezonings of to S1. Because it is a transitional, we want to make sure.
It can have, pretty big footprint buildings, schools,
Yeah.
things
School,
like
yeah.
that.
Flexible too.
So,
You don't know, like you said, you
Yeah.
don't really know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
okay, that's all the guidance I needed.
Item number 13, approval of utilities,
Do not have any at this time,
14, citizens forum.
and I do not have anyone that signed up.
They're left to be citizens, okay? In that case, the June 15, 2023 meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Rita Holiday, for all your years of service.
That's right.
You are awesome.
Because this is something that a lot of people don't understand when you come to the planning commission or you're serving on the planning commission. I came in really clueless, so you guys, and I think most of us are like, oh, okay, what are we doing here? I've learned so much, and what I appreciate is that you bring the history. It is important that we know where we came from, because if we don't, we can lose our way. And so you guys have really, you and Ed, I appreciate your history and what you have brought to the planning commission.
Well, I'll repeat something that Ralph McGill told me many times. If you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. And so that was something Ralph instilled in me. And then Bob Hill. I learned a lot from Bob Hill. And he was a great mentor and a fine person. So thank you all.
Thank you.
That cake with you.